morning, Ohio State fans, and welcome back to the last 11 Dubcast of the week, the last 11 Dubcast before the season opener. We have finally made it, and I'm here to talk about that which we have been waiting for all summer, all spring, for a very long time since Ohio State won the national championship. I'm here to talk about Ohio State versus Texas with our recruiting insider and one of the finest photographers in the sport of college football, Mr. Garrick Hodge. Garrick, how are you doing today? Are you excited?
I am excited. You are already starting the show with a lie, but other than that, yes, it's. I mean, one versus three doesn't get much better than that.
The Dubcast knows ball, and we do not tell lies on this show. That photo you got of Marvin Harrison Jr. tiptoeing the sideline a couple seasons ago now is reflective of your ability as a photographer, and I look forward to seeing what shots you capture on Saturday of this coveted 1 versus 3 matchup that is billed as the biggest season opener ever by Fox, and thankfully it is a season opener that we will get to see because they did strike that deal with YouTube TV as Dan predicted they would, and I said they wouldn't because I'm a pessimist, and that pessimism has translated into how I think this game is going to go for Ohio State, despite the fact that I'm wearing a jersey and I'm excited and ready to go. Before I get into my cloudy view of the game from a Buckeye fan perspective, part of the reason I did want to talk to you about the game is because you seem to have a rosier outlook than I do. Now, all of the staff scoring predictions are going to be posted on Saturday, 3 hours before the game, as they traditionally do every season, every game during the season. And in addition to that, the rest of the members of the beat, I believe a little bit later today, are going to be posting a video with their own thoughts on how the game is going to go. Usually, people outside of the Ohio State fan base that keep an eye on 11 Warriors tend to think that we've got a very Homer-centric view on how these games are going to go, that we're always picking Ohio State to win. I think at least a fifth of the staff, including myself, are predicting them to lose this game. But you are not among them, and I'm curious, where is your optimism rooted in terms of why Ohio State is going to topple the number one team in the country tomorrow?
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic. I don't know that. I mean, it's a 50-50 game, and I mean, if Texas wins on Saturday, I won't be surprised in the least. But I just think that these two teams are a mirror of each other, in that they have legitimate stars on both sides of the ball, but they are replacing a lot. And granted, everybody seems to be replacing a lot, not named Penn State. Hence why the top 10 is a lot of all over the place, more than usual, I should say, in a normal preseason. But yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic about Ohio State, especially in a coin flip game like this. They're at home. Noon game aside, all the fan angst, Ohio Stadium is still a tough place to play when it's a big game, and the fans are going to be ready for this one. You can't tell me that they won't be. Arch Manning is probably going to be a very good quarterback, a very good football player, and I'm very bullish on his chances, both this season and in the long term. But he's still making his first meaningful start. And Ohio Stadium is probably not one of the top 200 places you want to do that in the country. So, but more than that, his offensive line, especially with the injury news coming out of Texas in the last month with two offensive linemen, only returning one starter. And I guess that maybe complements the biggest area of concern that Ohio State has with its defensive line, whereas you don't know where you're getting from Texas's offensive line either. So it's not like you're like, oh my goodness, I don't know how they're going to stack up. Both of these two teams in the trenches have some very legitimate questions. And when push comes to shove, one team has the best player on the planet in Jeremiah Smith, and another team has the second best player on the planet, Caleb Downs. And while I appreciate the hell out of Colin Simmons, who may be one of the best pass rushers in the game, if not the best, and Anthony Hill, who is going to be a really good NFL player and a good college player, of course, I just trust those guys. I trust the Ohio State wide receiver core. I trust Matt Sclair making plays down the seam. I think Brian Day and Brian Hartline are going to have a good game plan for Julian Sain. I think they're not going to ask him to do too much. They're not going to ask him to play hero ball. I think initially you're going to see a lot of screens, a lot of quick passes, a lot of quick pops, a lot of trying to run the ball, set the tone with James Peoples and CJ Donaldson, really test the interior out of that Texas defensive line because they have some questions there too. And look, maybe Arch Manning comes out and throws for 275 and Julian Sain's overmatched and we head into week 2 and we're looking at what went wrong. But I'm predicting somewhere around 27-24 in favor of Ohio State. I think this is going to be a nail biter all the way down to the end. But ultimately, I trust in Ohio Stadium. I trust in Ryan Day after a year in the benefit of the doubt. And I think they're going to walk out with a win over the number 1 team in the country to start the year.
Yeah, I agree that this is going to be a very close game and that it's pretty close to a 50-50 game. I think that I think anybody that believes or has deluded themselves into believing that they've got a good read on how this is going to go is probably just doing a disservice to themselves and anybody they're spouting that to. This is the first game of the season. There's been a lot of roster turnover for both of these teams, and it's just very difficult to assess what either team is going to look like against it's one thing when you're playing a team like Akron or another in-state school in Ohio in your opener, but it's an entirely different animal when you're talking about the number 1 team in the country, particularly in the first game. And so I think that you have to take kind of a broader view of how competitive top 3 matchups usually play out when assessing how this is going to go, rather than trying to really dive in on the differences between these two teams and how they could play. Because again, these are 2 new teams, and even though there's players, familiar characters from the last time these 2 teams played in the Cotton Bowl, especially given that you've got 2 different players at quarterback now, and arguably a much more encouraging situation for Texas, it's more difficult, I think, to get a read on how this is going to play out than trying to predict how the Cotton Bowl was, where I was feeling very good, especially after how well Ohio State passed the test against Oregon, that they were going to get it done against Texas. Now, for anybody already fading my outlook on what's going to happen here, I did think that Ohio State was going to beat Oregon the first time they played them last year, and that was wrong. And then I thought Oregon was going to beat them in the Rose Bowl, and that was obviously way off base. So my recent history picking Ohio State in games where they play the number 1 team hasn't exactly been too great. But the thing that I am really like, what has guided my decision making in terms of how I think this is going to play out is, when I was looking at the kind of position group versus position group comparison that Dan Hope did earlier this week in terms of assessing who has the advantage at running back, at receiver, at offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, the thing that was hard for me to get over was that Texas is going to be the better built team with its front 7. Even if Ohio State has the more experienced offensive line, as you were inferring earlier, the front 7 for Texas, I think, is going to be probably the biggest impact in this game, because I think it limits the ways in which Ohio State can win. I don't think if Ohio State gets out to an early lead that they're going to be able to lean on their running backs in order to kill clock and just try to get out of the stadium with a close win. I think that they're going to have their foot on the gas the whole time, and that's going to require Julian Sayin to play very sharp ball against a very good defense coming right out of the gate. He's got the supporting cast that would permit the ability to do that, but it's still something that's easier said than done. Conversely, I think that Texas, if they're able to get out to an early lead, they're going to have an easier time maintaining that lead if it's a close game than I think Ohio State would. So I said 21-17 Texas would win. But again, I won't, just as you said, you wouldn't be surprised if Texas emerges victorious. I'm not going to be surprised if Ohio State wins this game. And it is a bit of a nice emotional hedge for me, because if I'm wrong, I'm an Ohio State fan. I don't care. I'm happy to see them win. But if I'm right, I get to brag about it and say, yeah, I was right. And, I'll have a nice early spot in the staff scoring prediction rankings going into the rest of the schedule. One thing I want to ask you, because you talked about them being at home being a good advantage, given Archie Manning is making his first career start and playing in his first game on the road, even in college. I think it was Mack Brown either yesterday or a couple days ago made a comment about how Ohio, like it actually really benefits Texas that this game is happening at noon as opposed to night, because he recalled when Texas visited Columbus in 2005, I believe. He said that it was probably the most obnoxious is the wrong word, but I'm sure it was obnoxious given the way that he described it, saying that if we weren't signaling, we wouldn't have been able to hear anybody on on radios if we had them giving in the plays or whatever. He said it was the loudest environment he can remember. You've been around the scene here for a couple years now, so you've been at that environment both during the day and at night. Would you agree with that assessment that it's probably going to be a little bit easier for Texas with the game happening during the day versus if this was happening at night? You think it would be a much more raucous environment than it would be otherwise?
I wouldn't say a much more raucous environment. Yeah, sure. Naturally, it's probably has a little bit more juice if it would have been at night. I mean, a lot of that has to do with what I'll call liquid courage. A lot of fans like a little bit more of that in them. So naturally, everybody's a little bit more angsty at that time of day compared to.
It is Labor Day weekend, so I'm sure some people are going to be starting early.
Right, but ultimately, for me, it comes down to, and Ryan Day kind of alluded to this too. Regardless of whether it's at noon, 2 in the morning, 5 a.m., 2 a.m., whatever time it kicks off, it's 1 versus 3, man. You're going up against number 1. If you're a fan and you can't get up for this, and you've had, I know, months and months to be really upset about it, and trust me, I'm with you, man. I wish this was at 7:32. It deserves to be a 7:30, but the contract is the contract with Fox, and the Big Ten ain't getting out of it for at least another couple years, and so it is what it is. But if you can't get up for that, then I mean, what's the point, right? Sure, if there isn't a chaotic environment at Ohio Stadium and they aren't creating chaos, causing false starts, whatever, then I mean, you got no one to blame but yourselves. In all honesty, yeah, could there be a little bit extra juice if it was at night because of the liquid courage? Yeah, sure, naturally, of course. I'm not going to say there wouldn't be, but I don't know. Like I usually do our on the beat article segment where you interview an opposing beat writer and get their takes on the game. And Danny Davis was kind enough to join us, who covers Texas. Texas does a great job with them. But I asked him about the noon game thing, kind of similar to how you did, and he just laughed and he was like, "Man, y'all must have been bored this offseason. I can't believe this is a talking point." And granted, it's a little different. I mean, if it was a noon kickoff in Austin, I'm sure they would be pretty upset about it too. Well, granted, it would be 11 a.m. in Austin because of Central Time, but nonetheless, I don't know. While Mack Brown said very nice things about how chaotic Ohio State was in 2005, and I don't not believe him because that was a great game and a hell of an environment, but I don't think anyone from Texas is going, "Oh, thank God, this is a noon game. We're gonna coast, boys. This is awesome. We're gonna, you know what? We don't even need to pump in crowd noise to our practice today. Let's just get out of there and yep, that's 1-0." So I don't know. That's just my cynicism at work. But yeah, I think the advantages are minuscule at best.
Fair enough. I agree that it, at least in this context, I think maybe against a lowlier opponent, it's probably, fans are getting more jacked up for a nighttime environment than they would at noon. But if you can't gear up when the number one team in the country is coming to town, yeah, you're attending this sport and invested in this team for all the wrong reasons. This is the kind of game you get up for and you get excited for, not just because it's the opener. And okay, finally, this is it. This is the last bit of content for me after a whole offseason, a tumultuous offseason here on the Dubcast. We finally have Ohio State football back, and I am so ready for it. And I am so grateful to you, Garrick, and the rest of the beat for keeping us all informed on everything that's going to be happening before, during, and after the game. And I'm really looking forward to another season of this with you and the rest of 11 Warriors. So thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you guys out there. And thank you very much for tuning into the 11 Dubcast. And we will be back Monday morning with Chase Brown to recap the game, good or bad. Take care, folks. Go Bucks.